Ex-Trump Intel chief Joe Kent goes public with explosive claims about Trump's Iran war, a day after resigning. There was no imminent Iranian threat. Joe Kent tears into Trump's narrative for going to war. Kent drops bombshell allegations about the Charlie Kirk assassination, raising new questions about what really happened. Joe Kent has now spoken out publicly after abruptly quitting his role as director of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center. In his first extended remarks, Kent weighed in on multiple explosive issues, including the ongoing Iran war, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and more. He broke his silence in a 1-hour and 40-minute podcast conversation with Tucker Carlson, offering a detailed, unfiltered account of his concerns. Kent claimed there was no intelligence indicating that Iran was preparing any kind of major sneak attack on the United States. Joe Kent said, and I quote, "There was no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11, Pearl Harbor, etc. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence." Unquote. Kent argued that the late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had actually been moderating Iran's nuclear program, acting as a brake on the country's most hardline ambitions. On Iran's nuclear capability, Kent insisted that Tehran was not on the verge of acquiring a bomb, directly contradicting Trump's claims that Iran was weeks away from a weapon. According to Kent, Iran's strategy was focused on maintaining a limited nuclear program for leverage and prestige, rather than abandoning it entirely or racing for a covert weapons breakout. Joe Kent said, and I quote, "I'm no fan of the former Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei. However, he was moderating their nuclear program. He was preventing them from getting a nuclear weapon. If you take him out, if you kill him aggressively, people are going to rally around that regime." Unquote. Joe Kent also said he believed Israel had effectively drawn the United States into its current conflict with Iran, exerting outsized influence over Washington's war decisions. He directly contradicted Secretary of State Marco Rubio's claim that an Israeli strike would inevitably provoke an Iranian response against American forces. According to Kent, Rubio's logic was fundamentally flawed because there was no credible intelligence suggesting Iran was planning any attack without being provoked first. Joe Kent said, and I quote, "So, the imminent threat that the Secretary of State is describing is not from Iran. It's from Israel. And I think this speaks to the broader issue, who is in charge of our policy in the Middle East." Unquote. Kent said that, in the run-up to the Iran war, key national security figures were blocked from directly sharing their opinions with President Trump before critical decisions were made. He claimed that dissenting voices inside the administration were largely stifled, very different from the more open internal debates that had preceded earlier U.S. strike decisions. According to Kent, the intelligence briefings reaching the Oval Office failed to provide any real sanity check for the president, instead reinforcing a narrow, pro-war narrative. A senior U.S. official later confirmed that Kent himself had been sidelined from participating in Trump's intelligence briefings, even as the Iran crisis escalated. Joe Kent said, and I quote, "In the lead-up to this last iteration, good deal of key decision-makers were not allowed to come and express their opinion to the president. They had that discussion, behind closed doors, and there wasn't a chance for any dissenting voices to come." Unquote. Joe Kent also waded into domestic politics, talking about the MAGA movement and the shocking assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Kent claimed that the Justice Department and the FBI had blocked him from fully probing Kirk's assassination, limiting his ability to chase potential wider plots. He had previously been rebuked by FBI Director Kash Patel for trying to gain deeper access to FBI systems while reviewing files linked to the Kirk case, according to CNN and other reports. Joe Kent said, and I quote, "The investigation that the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. There was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into, but there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down." Unquote. He also explained why he chose to break with the Trump administration, saying he could no longer stay silent about a war he believes was built on false premises. Joe Kent said, and I quote, "It became really clear to me, over this past weekend, that our message just wasn't getting through. I know what happens if I stay and I go along with this, I'm going to be, knee-deep in it, trying to just chip away and make a difference. But my ability to have my voice heard, to present data that runs contrary to the trajectory and the agenda that the administration's on, that's going to be squashed before it even really reaches the White House." Unquote. Joe Kent has now emerged as the highest-ranking Trump administration official to resign in protest over the Iran conflict. Following his resignation, U.S. President Donald Trump publicly branded Kent weak on security, pointedly dismissing his criticisms of the war.
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat